Welcome to Harmonized. I am your host, Gigi Naval, a registered dietitian for over 30 years who transitioned to practicing with a functional nutrition approach to help you improve your metabolic health and energy by way of optimizing your gut and hormone health to work in harmony with each other. It's that bitter time of the year for me because it's the end of the school year, and I teach at an Adventist university, Loma Linda University, and I want to make sure that you know this podcast is not associated with Loma Linda University. It is separate from where I work full time, but it is bittersweet because, you know, we always get attached to our students. We love them so much. We grow to love them and enjoy their company. We enjoy the laughter that they bring into our lives. We enjoy teaching them, facilitating their education. And when they leave us, it is so sad and so bitter, but sweet because we do see the struggles that they go through individually, and then we see how God has helped them in the past 3 years, and we celebrate that with them. So it's definitely a joyous time, but at the same time, we're gonna miss them. And working at Loma Linda University, teaching at a university, it always breaks my heart when, and I hear this every so often, that there are some students who have difficulties with migraine headaches. And of course, we know that stress is a big trigger. And, you know, I hear different variations of the migraine experience that they have. Migraines and then their regular headaches, but when they have the migraines, it can really take them out. It can really make them so exhausted, especially when they say that the light really makes them feel so horrible. And sometimes they can feel so nauseated. There are just so many descriptions that I hear every so often. And continually, I like to go back and see what can help them. And then there are other colleagues that I also know about and other friends who experience migraines. So it's like, okay, what can be done to really help them? And here are 3 areas that I feel need to be addressed and are not discussed and talked about enough when it comes to having migraine headaches. So we have to keep in mind that God designed our bodies to communicate to us. When things are off, we could potentially experience pain. We could feel bloated. We could feel really tired and fatigued. There are just so many signals to our body. And it usually tells us, you know what, something is off. And you need to find the root cause of why you are experiencing this discomfort on a regular basis. So what is it about migraine headaches? What is it telling us? The first thing I want to talk about is insulin resistance. I have been looking at the literature, and there are studies after studies after studies saying that there are associations that have been found with migraine headaches and insulin resistance. So when someone has insulin resistance, their insulin, the hormone insulin, it's not working quite the way that we would like it to. And insulin is the hormone that helps get our blood sugars into our cells, and then we have energy and other processes in our body can take place. But when insulin isn't doing its job, then it can make blood sugars become elevated. Okay, so but not only elevated, not only can having insulin resistance make our blood sugars spike, well, blood sugars can also crash. And so the studies have been showing us that when blood sugars spike or when they crash, it can trigger migraine headaches to take place. And when insulin resistance is brewing in our body, it can really cause there to be a state of inflammation. And when we have systemic inflammation because of having insulin resistance, it is linked to having a lower pain threshold, and it can increase migraine susceptibility. And when there is insulin resistance, it can lead to having vascular changes or changes within our blood vessels. It can impair our blood vessel function. And so then, because there can be a change in the blood vessel function, that potentially plays a role in the development of migraines. Okay, and then when you have insulin resistance, it can also lead to having neurotransmitter imbalances. Neurotransmitters are serotonin, okay, and other hormones like that, dopamine, and to name a few. And so that can affect the balance of the neurochemicals, which involves pain processing. And so the studies have shown that when those who have migraine headaches and they are doing their best to manage their blood sugars and to help their pancreas work better to also then help their insulin levels that they produce work better, that can also help decrease and manage migraine headaches and improve the migraine headache status. So fluctuations of spikes of blood sugars and crashes can trigger the migraine headaches. Okay, so another area is number 2 is having an MTHFR gene variation. That stands for methylene tetrahydrofolate reductase. So this is an enzyme that will take the folate that we consume in the food that we eat, and even the synthetic form of folate, which is called folic acid. It will take that and convert it to the active form of folate. And folate, when it's active, and it's called methylated folate, along with methylated or active vitamin B12, that will help with what we call our methylation pathway. It is a complicated pathway that God created. It starts off with this amino acid called methionine, and then methionine is supposed to be broken down to produce another enzyme called SAMe, and that produces these methyl groups. Methyl groups have 1 carbon and 3 hydrogens. And so SAMe will give the different processes in our bodies these methyl groups so that it can take place in the way that it should. But if the individual has an MTHFR gene variation, then the variation of that gene will say, you know what? I am not going to do what the regular version does, which is to convert the folate from the food that we eat to the active form, or the folic acid in the synthetic version. Okay, so the synthetic folic acid, which is added to, when it is adding folic acid, the synthetic form of folate, to rice that is refined, or refined pastas, or just any food item that is added with synthetic folic acid, well then what happens with this gene variation is that it will not convert folic acid to the active form. It will plug up the system. It will cause a block in this methylation pathway. Okay, but folate from regular food sources like the dark green leafies, that's fine. It will be okay. But if there's not enough methylated folate, then from SAMe, okay, that step in the methylation pathway, from SAMe, it forms what we call homocysteine. And this homocysteine, okay, it's also an amino acid that's supposed to convert back to methionine through the help of methylated folate and methylated vitamin B12. But when you have a gene variation and there's not enough methylated folate, then this conversion of homocysteine back to methionine will not take place, and there will be too much homocysteine. So when there's an elevated amount of homocysteine, it can cause, again, systemic inflammation in the body, and particularly in our central nervous system. And so this can lower, again, the pain threshold and increase migraine susceptibility. So that's another avenue that, okay, the MTHFR gene variation, or one avenue that MTHFR gene variation can bring on migraine headaches. And with an MTHFR gene variation, it can impair the function of the blood vessels, just like having insulin resistance. And so this could lead to the different changes in the blood vessels. And those blood vessels, when they are affected, when they change, that can affect blood flow, and that can affect blood flow to the brain and triggering those migraine headaches to take place. And when there is an MTHFR gene variation, then it can lead to excitotoxicity, in which homocysteine may act as an excitatory amino acid. And so it causes overstimulation of brain cells and potentially contributing to the migraine onset. So it is so important to know what your nutrigenetics are and to know if you have any of the gene variations of MTHFR, because there are two major ones. And just anybody who has any of those versions, that would be good to know so that something can be done. And when there is that gene variation of MTHFR, it can also affect neurotransmitter imbalances, just like we talked about with insulin resistance. And so these imbalances of neurotransmitters can affect migraine headaches. And again, one of these, One of these neurotransmitters is serotonin. And so if that's affected because of the MTHFR gene variation and it's not being dealt with, okay, if the individual is consuming a lot of folic acid, synthetic folic acid, not doing all the other things, then that can also potentially bring on the migraine headaches. And what's also so important about the MTHFR gene variation is that it is involved with our detoxification process, especially the detoxification process that goes on in the liver. And so this gene variation makes it difficult to clear out toxins and byproducts that goes through our system, and that can trigger migraine headaches as well. So potentially, when someone does address their MTHFR gene variation, that can potentially help with decreasing or managing migraines. Okay, so another area to look at, in addition to blood sugars and MTHFR gene variation, is this: having Helicobacter pylori. Helicobacter pylori is known to be a bacteria that is embedded in the lining of the stomach. And when it's there, it turns off our parietal cells. Our parietal cells helps us produce stomach acid. Stomach acid helps us in dealing with and getting rid of the bacteria that we don't want. It helps kill it off. And so if we have H. pylori and it has deactivated the parietal cells, then we're not producing. It potentially allows us to not produce enough stomach acid. Okay, and so there are issues with that. Then that can lead to an imbalance in the gut community, and that can lead to having inflammation that begins in the gut. And then the gut speaks to the brain, and they're always in communication with each other. So this can also affect triggering migraine headaches too. All right, and when anybody has H. pylori, it actually causes inflammation to take place, not only in the gut, inside, not only in the community of the gut, but the lining of the gut, because it can release these pro-inflammatory markers such as IL-6, IL-8, and TNF, alpha, tumor necrosis factor. So the interleukin 6, interleukin 8, these are pro-inflammatory cytokines that could lead to inflammation in the body, and those have been found to be associated with migraine headaches. And these inflammatory mediators, they can cross the blood-brain barrier and affect our peripheral nervous system. And so it contributes to the neuroinflammation that happens in the brain, which are hallmarks of migraines. Okay, and having H. pylori can influence the release of vasoactive substances. And then that can constrict the blood vessels that can trigger the migraine headaches. And when we have H. pylori, remember I already told you that it can turn off the parietal cells, and the parietal cells not only helps us produce stomach acid, but it also helps us produce what we call intrinsic factor to help us absorb vitamin B12. And so when we don't have enough vitamin B12 on board, that can contribute to having migraine headaches too. So that's why we say it is so important to work on rebalancing the gut community. And here's the thing. Half of the world's population has H. pylori and they don't know it. Let me tell you, the majority of the clients that I work with, when we do a stool test that uses quantitative PCR, it's very sensitive and specific, so it can really catch certain things, especially H. pylori. Let me tell you that a good number of my clients have H. pylori, and I had it myself too. What a difference it's made in my life in so many areas. It sure took out the bloating. That led to the imbalances of the good bacteria and the undesirable bacteria that we don't really want. So many people have it and they don't realize that they do. So that's why it's so important to work on rebalancing the gut, see why the imbalances are there, okay? Because that could make a big difference. So God designed our bodies so that our gut and our hormones work in harmony with each other. And insulin is, yes, you got it right, is a hormone, okay? Everything works together. And so let's review. First area is that if you have migraines on a regular basis, it could be telling you, you know what, you might have some insulin resistance brewing, because those blood sugars can go up and down. That can trigger the migraine headaches. So studies have shown that when that is controlled, it can potentially help with mitigating migraine headaches. And the second thing that we talked about is having an MTHFR gene variation. It might be telling you, your migraine headaches might be telling you, you might have an MTHFR gene variation. Get tested. Know your nutrigenetics. That's why I like to also include the nutrigenetic panel in my program, the Gut and Hormone Harmonizer, because then we get to see if you have that gene variation or not. And the studies have shown that if you also address your folate status, okay, and you help optimize your detoxification process by helping your liver out and being mindful of having that MTHFR gene variation, then the studies have shown that can also help with decreasing and managing migraine headaches. And then, yes, there have been studies that have shown that when you work on eradicating H. pylori, you rebalance the gut community, that it can also potentially help with improving or decreasing and really trying to get rid of migraine headaches. Okay, I'm not saying that if you work on all these, you identify all these, that it will make it go away totally, completely for the rest of your life. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that the studies show, and what I have seen in working with clients and patients, is that it can be improved. So listen to what your body is saying. What is this migraine headache telling me? Do I have insulin resistance? Do I have an MTHFR gene variation? Or do I have H. pylori in my stomach? And do something about it. These are the areas that I love helping people with, because I know it can really help. It can really improve things. All right. So yeah, don't forget that God designed our gut and our hormones to work in harmony with each other. And when that's off, then we get signals from our body. All right. And all that we do and all that we eat and drink, let us do it all for the glory of God. If you need personalized help in resolving your gut, hormone, or metabolic health challenges, then sign up to work with me in my fusion program called Gut and Hormone Harmonizer in the link located in the description.